The homeless man's wrists were covered in dirt and grime, but as Officer Martinez applied the handcuffs, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. A distinctive surgical scar he had seen only once before, in a missing person file worth $3.2 billion. March 23, 2019. Skid Row, Los Angeles. 2:47 a.m. Officer Daniel Martinez had been patrolling these streets for 15 years. He'd seen it all, or so he thought. The call came in as a simple 4:15, disturbing the peace. A homeless man was screaming at invisible enemies outside a closed convenience store, terrifying late-night workers. What should have been a routine arrest would instead unravel one of the biggest mysteries in American business history. Because the man Officer Martinez was about to handcuff wasn't just any vagrant. He was Harrison Webb, the billionaire tech mogul who had vanished without a trace 7 years earlier, leaving behind a fortune, a family, and questions that nobody could answer. The figure huddled against the store's metal shutters looked like thousands of others on Skid Row. Matted hair that might have once been blonde, now gray with dirt and age. Layers of torn clothing despite the warm California night. The unmistakable smell of someone who hadn't bathed in weeks, maybe months. "Sir, I need you to stand up slowly and keep your hands where I can see them," Officer Martinez called out, his hand instinctively resting on his service weapon. 15 years on these streets had taught him that the most routine calls could turn dangerous in seconds. The man looked up, and even in the dim streetlight, Martinez could see the terror in his eyes. Not the usual fear of arrest or the paranoia of mental illness, something deeper. "Please," the man whispered, his voice cracked and raw. "You don't understand. They'll find me. They'll know where I am." "Who will find you, sir?" Martinez asked, his tone softening slightly. Mental health calls were common here. This man clearly needed help, not just handcuffs. I can't go into the system. Please just let me go. I'll leave. I'll never come back to this area, I promise." The desperation in his voice was palpable. But Officer Martinez had a job to do. The store workers had called 911, and he couldn't just let a disturbed individual continue frightening people. "I'm sorry, sir, but I need to take you in. We'll get you some help, maybe a meal and a place to sleep tonight." As Martinez reached for his handcuffs, the man suddenly stood, pressing himself against the shutters. "No! You don't understand. I'm nobody. I'm just nobody." It was when Martinez gently but firmly turned the man around, pulling his hands behind his back, that he saw it. On the man's left wrist, partially hidden by dirt and what looked like old burn marks, was a distinctive surgical scar, perfect straight lines forming a precise rectangle, with 4 small dots at the corners where surgical pins had been placed. Martinez's hands froze mid-motion. He had seen that exact scar pattern before, not on the streets, but in a briefing room 7 years ago when every cop in California had been shown photos of Harrison Webb's identifying marks. The tech billionaire had broken his wrist in a skiing accident in Aspen, requiring an experimental surgical procedure that left a unique scar pattern. "Sir," Martinez said slowly, his heart beginning to race. "What's your name?" The man's shoulders sagged in defeat. "John. Just John." "John what? Does it matter?" "Nobody. John Nobody." Martinez completed the handcuffing, but his mind was racing. The height was right, 6'1". The build, despite the weight loss, matched. Even through the dirt and grime, he could see the bone structure that had once graced the covers of Forbes and Time magazine. As he led the man to his patrol car, Martinez noticed other things. The way he walked, despite everything, there was still a trace of the confident stride that had once commanded boardrooms. The hands, soft despite the dirt, not calloused like most long-term homeless individuals. And strangest of all, the teeth. When the man grimaced, they were perfect. Too perfect for someone who'd supposedly been on the streets for years. "Unit 23 to dispatch," Martinez called into his radio as he helped the man into the back seat. "I need a supervisor at booking, and contact Detective Riley from Missing Persons. Tell her it's about the Webb case." The radio crackled with confusion. "The Webb case? That's been cold for years, 23. I know. Just trust me on this one." Harrison Webb had been the kind of billionaire that America loved. Self-made, starting his first company in his garage at 19. By 35, he was running Webb Tech Industries, a company that had revolutionized data encryption and made him one of the richest men in the country. $3.2 billion, according to Forbes' last estimate before he vanished. He had it all: a mansion in Malibu, a beautiful wife, 2 kids in private school, and the respect of Silicon Valley, which made his disappearance on June 15, 2012, all the more baffling. The last confirmed sighting had been at his office in downtown LA. Security footage showed him leaving at 9:47 p.m., getting into his Tesla, and driving out of the parking garage. His car was found 3 days later at LAX long-term parking, but Harrison Webb had never boarded a flight. He had simply vanished. The investigation had been massive. The FBI got involved, thinking kidnapping. His bank accounts were monitored, his credit cards tracked. But there was no activity, no ransom demands, no body, no clues. It was as if Harrison Webb had simply decided to stop existing. Theories ran wild. Some said he'd been murdered by business rivals. Others thought he'd fled the country with secret millions. A few even suggested he'd been recruited by the government for classified work. But as months turned to years with no answers, the case went cold. His wife had him declared legally dead after 5 years. His company was sold. Life moved on. But Officer Martinez was now driving through the empty LA streets with a man who might be the answer to all those questions. At the precinct, Martinez parked in the secured area usually reserved for high-profile arrests. His partner, Officer Janet Chen, looked at him quizzically as he helped the homeless man out of the car. "Why all the fuss, Danny? He seems pretty calm now." "Janet, I need you to trust me on this. No booking photos yet. No fingerprints until Detective Riley gets here. And absolutely no press." The homeless man, John Nobody, seemed to shrink further into himself. "Please," he whispered again. "You're making a mistake. I'm nobody special." Detective Sarah Riley arrived within 30 minutes, which told Martinez everything he needed to know about how seriously she was taking his call. Riley had been the lead investigator on the Webb disappearance, and Martinez knew it had haunted her ever since. She took one look at the man sitting in the interview room, and her face went pale. "Jesus Christ," she breathed. "Get me fingerprint kit. Now." "I'm telling you, you're wasting your time," the man insisted, but his voice was shaking. "I'm not who you think I am." Riley sat across from him, studying his face. "Mr. Webb, that's not my name. I've been looking for you for 7 years. Your wife thinks you're dead. Your children grew up without a father. If you're not Harrison Webb, then let us fingerprint you and prove it." The man's composure finally cracked. Tears began rolling down his dirty cheeks. "You don't understand. If I'm in the system, if they know I'm alive, they'll find me. They'll finish what they started." "Who? Who's they?" For a long moment, the man was silent. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, "The people who killed Harrison Webb 7 years ago." Riley and Martinez exchanged glances. "But you're sitting right here," Riley said carefully. The man looked up, his eyes hollow. "No. Harrison Webb died on June 15th, 2012. I'm just the ghost who survived. The fingerprint results came back within minutes. Perfect match. DNA swab confirmed it. The homeless man sitting in LAPD custody was indeed Harrison Webb, one of America's most successful entrepreneurs who had been missing and presumed dead for 7 years. But the real mystery was just beginning. Over the next 6 hours, with cameras rolling and FBI agents now present, Harrison Webb told a story that seemed impossible, yet every detail he provided would later be verified. On June 15, 2012, Webb had received a call that changed everything. His company's encryption software, the technology that had made him billions, had a fatal flaw. Not a bug, a deliberate backdoor that he had never authorized. Someone within his company had been selling access to this backdoor to unknown parties that turned out to be foreign intelligence services.
I confronted my head of security about it, Webb explained, his voice stronger now that the truth was coming out. Marcus Chen, he'd been with me since the beginning. I trusted him with everything. But when I showed him the evidence, he didn't deny it. He just smiled and said I had 2 choices. Take my share of the profits and stay quiet, or disappear. Why didn't you go to the FBI? Agent Robertson asked. Webb laughed bitterly. With what proof? Marcus had been careful. Everything pointed back to me. On paper, it looked like I was the one who'd authorized the back door, like I was the traitor selling out American secrets. He'd spent years setting me up as the fall guy. The assassination attempt had come that very night. Webb's car had been forced off the road on Mulholland Drive. He'd survived by pure luck. The car had landed in thick brush that cushioned the impact. But as he crawled from the wreckage, bleeding and disoriented, he made a decision that would define the next 7 years of his life. I knew if I survived officially, if I went to a hospital or called for help, they'd try again. And next time they might go after my family. So Harrison Webb died that night, and John Nobody was born. He'd hidden the Tesla at LAX to throw off investigators, then disappeared into the one place no one would look for a billionaire, the streets of Skid Row. For 7 years, he'd lived among the invisible people of Los Angeles, moving constantly, never staying in one place too long, always watching for signs that Marcus Chen's people had found him. But why stay in L.A.? Detective Riley asked. Why not flee the country? Webb's answer was heartbreaking in its simplicity. Because I could still see them, my family, from a distance. I'd watch my kids walk to school, see my wife at the grocery store. I couldn't be with them, but I could make sure they were safe. What Harrison Webb didn't know was that Marcus Chen had died 3 years earlier in a private plane crash in Switzerland. The network he'd built had collapsed without him. The foreign intelligence connections had moved on to other sources. The danger Webb had been hiding from had largely evaporated. But Webb had something even more valuable than his testimony: evidence. For 7 years, he'd been gathering proof of the conspiracy, using library computers and free Wi-Fi, always careful to hide his digital footprint. He'd tracked the money, identified the foreign agents, and built a case that would expose one of the largest corporate espionage operations in U.S. history. I hid USB drives all over the city, he explained, in places only a homeless person could access. Storm drains, abandoned buildings, places the police don't even go. 7 years of evidence. Over the next 72 hours, following Webb's directions, FBI agents recovered 17 USB drives containing terabytes of data, financial records, encrypted communications, names and addresses of foreign handlers. It was an intelligence goldmine that would lead to arrests in 12 countries. But the personal cost had been staggering. Webb's wife had remarried. His children, now teenagers, didn't remember him. His company had been sold and dismantled. The billions he'd earned were gone, distributed to shareholders and his widow. Was it worth it? Agent Robertson asked during one of the interviews. Webb was quiet for a long moment. I used to think about that every night, sleeping under bridges, eating from dumpsters. This brilliant life I'd built, thrown away because I wouldn't be a traitor. But you know what? Yes, it was worth it, because I can look at myself in the mirror, when I can find a mirror, and know I did the right thing. The media explosion was immediate and overwhelming. "Billionaire rises from the dead," screamed the headlines. "Homeless hero saves America's secrets," declared others. The story was so fantastic that many questioned whether it was real. But for Harrison Webb, the media circus was secondary to a more personal drama. His ex-wife, Rebecca, now remarried, agreed to meet him at a neutral location, the offices of her attorney. The reunion was captured by security cameras, though the audio was sealed by court order. Those present described it as one of the most emotional scenes they'd ever witnessed. Rebecca, who had mourned her husband and moved on with her life, faced the ghost of her past. She reportedly alternated between rage at his deception and grief for all the lost years. "You let us think you were dead," witnesses reported her screaming. "Do you have any idea what that did to the children?" "To me?" Webb's response was quiet but firm. "I did it to keep you alive." The children, Tyler, now 19, and Emma, 17, were even more complicated. Tyler refused to see his father at all. The boy who had been 12 when his father vanished had spent his teenage years as the kid whose dad had abandoned them. Emma, who had been 10, agreed to one meeting. "I don't remember much about you," she told him in a conversation that was later shared with Webb's permission. "But I remember you used to tell me that sometimes doing the right thing is the hardest thing. I guess you really believed that." The legal complexities were staggering. Webb was technically still married to Rebecca when she remarried, making her second marriage potentially invalid. His death certificate had to be reversed. His assets, what remained of them, were in legal limbo. Lawyers would spend years sorting through the mess. But Webb seemed unconcerned with reclaiming his fortune. "I learned to live with nothing," he said in his first public interview. "You'd be surprised how little you actually need." The arrests began within weeks. Using Webb's evidence, the FBI rolled up spy networks that had been operating for over a decade. 17 corporate executives were indicted. 3 members of Congress were implicated in the cover-up. The scandal reached into the highest levels of several major tech companies. Webb himself became an unlikely hero, the billionaire who gave up everything rather than betray his country. Movie deals were offered. Book contracts presented. Everyone wanted a piece of his story. But Webb surprised everyone again. He refused all offers, instead taking a job as a cybersecurity consultant for a nonprofit that helped protect human rights organizations from digital surveillance. His salary, $60,000 a year. "I spent 7 years among people society throws away," he explained. "Homeless veterans who served their country and got nothing in return. Families destroyed by medical debt. Good people who just hit a run of bad luck. I can't go back to caring about stock prices and quarterly earnings." He moved into a modest apartment in Koreatown, far from his former Malibu mansion. He volunteered at homeless shelters, using his experience to help others navigate the brutal reality of life on the streets. He started a foundation using the money from the government's whistleblower program. His share of the fines collected from the companies involved in the espionage. Officer Martinez, who had made the arrest that started it all, stayed in touch. They met for coffee once a month, an unlikely friendship between a cop and the billionaire he'd found on Skid Row. "You know what the strangest part is?" Webb told him one day. "I'm happier now than I was when I had billions. Back then, I was always worried about losing what I had. Now I've already lost everything and survived. There's a freedom in that." But the story took one final twist that no one saw coming. 6 months after Webb's return to public life, a package arrived at the FBI field office in Los Angeles. Inside was a letter and a set of documents that changed everything. The letter was from Marcus Chen, dated 3 days before his supposed death in Switzerland. "Harrison," it read, "if you're reading this, then you survived and I didn't. I need you to know the truth. Yes, I built the back door. Yes, I sold secrets. But not for money or ideology. They had my daughter. The Chinese MSS kidnapped her when she was studying abroad and held her for 3 years. Every piece of intelligence I sold bought her another month of life. I know you discovered the truth, and I know I tried to have you killed. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that the plane crash wasn't an accident. I made a deal. My life for my daughter's freedom and your safety. They kept their word. My daughter is now living under a new identity in Canada. You were never in danger after I died. I'm sorry for what I took from you, but I hope, as a father, you can understand why I did it. We both sacrificed everything for what we believed in. The only difference is that you're the hero, and I'm the villain. But in the end, we're both just fathers who did what we thought was right." The letter was authenticated. Chen's daughter was located, confirming the story. The villain of Webb's story became something more complex. Another victim of international espionage forced to choose between his country and his child. Webb's reaction to the letter was never made public, but those close to him said it changed him. He began visiting Chen's grave in Switzerland, leaving flowers each year on the anniversary of his death. He set up a scholarship fund in Chen's daughter's name. "We like our stories simple," Webb said in what would be his final public interview. "Good guys and bad guys, heroes and villains. But life is messier than that. Marcus and I were both caught in a machine bigger than either of us. We both made choices. We both paid prices. In the end, we were just 2 men trying to protect what we loved." Today, Harrison Webb still lives in that modest apartment in Koreatown. He still makes $60,000 a year. He still volunteers at homeless shelters. His relationship with his children remains complicated. Tyler has slowly begun to reconnect, while Emma has become an advocate for homeless rights, inspired by her father's story. The corporate espionage network he exposed led to the most significant intelligence reforms in a generation. The Webb protocols now protect whistleblowers who uncover similar schemes. His evidence is still being used in prosecutions around the world, but perhaps his greatest legacy is on the streets of Skid Row. The homeless community that sheltered him for 7 years now has a powerful advocate. Webb used his story to shine a light on the invisible people of America's cities. His foundation has housed over 3,000 people and provides free mental health services to thousands more. Officer Daniel Martinez, promoted to detective after the Webb case, now heads a special unit focused on missing persons among the homeless population. Inspired by Webb's case, they've reunited dozens of families and solved cold cases dating back decades. "Everyone has a story," Martinez says. "Harrison Webb taught me that. The person you walk past on the street, the one you don't even see, they might be hiding something incredible. They might be a hero in disguise." The convenience store where Webb was arrested has become an unlikely landmark. Someone painted a small mural on the wall, a phoenix rising from the ashes with the words, "Sometimes you have to lose everything to find out who you really are." Harrison Webb walks past it sometimes on his way to the shelter. He never stops, never acknowledges it. But witnesses say he always smiles, because Harrison Webb knows something that most billionaires never learn, that wealth isn't measured in dollars, that success isn't about what you own, and that sometimes the greatest fortune is simply the freedom to be yourself, even if yourself is nobody special at all.
The homeless man who turned out to be a billionaire. The billionaire who chose to remain nobody. The nobody who saved everyone. That's the paradox of Harrison Webb. And 7 years after Officer Martinez put handcuffs on him on that dark night in Skid Row, it's a paradox that continues to inspire and confound in equal measure. Some stories end with the hero reclaiming their throne. This one ends with a man who discovered that the throne was never what mattered in the first place. In a small office in Koreatown, Harrison Webb continues his work, anonymous and content. He's not homeless anymore, but he's not a billionaire either. He's something rarer and more valuable, a man at peace with his choices. And somewhere in Los Angeles on any given night, Officer Martinez patrols the streets with a different perspective. Every face in the shadows could be hiding a story. Every arrest could be the beginning of something extraordinary. Because if Harrison Webb taught us anything, it's that heroes don't always wear capes or drive Teslas or live in Malibu mansions. Sometimes they wear torn clothes and carry their entire world in a shopping cart. Sometimes the richest man in the room is the one who has nothing left to lose. And sometimes, just sometimes, the person you least expect turns out to be exactly who the world needs them to be. March 14th, 2026. Koreatown, Los Angeles. It was nearly midnight when Harrison Webb's phone buzzed. An old flip phone he kept purely for emergencies. The number flashing on the screen wasn't saved, but he knew it. Only 3 people in the world had it, and one of them had been buried 3 years ago. His hand trembled slightly as he answered. "Harrison?" The voice was low, cautious. "Yes, this is Elise Chen, Marcus's daughter." She had never reached out before, despite the scholarship, despite the letter that had rewritten so much of Harrison's understanding of the past. "I think someone's following me." At the FBI field office, 8:20 a.m., Agent Robertson sat with his arms crossed, listening carefully as Harrison recounted the phone call. "Did she give you any details?" "She was scared. Said someone's been watching her apartment. Same face, different cars. It started 2 weeks ago, after she applied for a research grant from a foundation linked to a tech contractor, Parallax Systems." Robertson leaned forward. "Parallax?" Harrison nodded. "Marcus told me they were one of the companies buying backdoor access. I flagged them in the original data." Robertson exhaled slowly. "They're still operational. Different leadership, new branding, but same skeleton underneath. We've tried to crack them for years. If they know Elise is Marcus's daughter, they may think she has something to hide or expose. Then we have to move her. Now." "Already in progress," Robertson said, rising. "But Harrison, if they're stirring again, we may not be done with this war." Meanwhile, Detective Martinez had his own ghosts to face. Since the Webb case, he'd built a task force dedicated to solving missing persons cases linked to the homeless population. They'd found 14 people believed dead, living in shadows. But that morning, Martinez was reviewing a new file that chilled him. A body found in an abandoned storage unit in Echo Park. Decomposed, male, late 30s. A wallet found nearby had one item, a faded ID card for WebTech Industries. Name, Samir Patel. Martinez blinked. Patel had been Harrison's lead software engineer, one of the few people who truly understood the encryption algorithms at the heart of WebTech's empire. He'd vanished shortly after Webb in 2012, assumed to have fled or been silenced. Martinez picked up his phone. "Riley, we have a problem." March 17th, 2026. Safe House, Pasadena. Elise sat across from Harrison, arms crossed, eyes wary. "I didn't want to call you," she admitted. "Not because I blamed you. I just didn't want to be part of that world again." "You're not," he replied. "But it has a way of pulling people back in. They think I know something, but I don't.
I only applied for the grant because the research lab at UCLA needed funding. What kind of research? Quantum decryption. Harrison closed his eyes. Of course they're watching you. You think it's connected? I think it's exactly what they're afraid of. Over the following days, Harrison began noticing small things. A light on in his hallway he didn't remember turning on. A car parked near his building for 3 consecutive nights. A man asking too many questions at the shelter he volunteered at. He reported everything to the FBI, but old instincts kicked in. Harrison had spent years surviving in the shadows. He knew when he was being watched. Then someone broke into his apartment. Nothing stolen, nothing damaged, just a single photo missing from a drawer not on display. A photo of him and Samir Patel, dated 3 weeks before Harrison's disappearance in 2012. They were sending a message. Detective Riley's investigation into Patel's death revealed more than expected. Toxicology showed traces of a rare paralytic agent, one developed for intelligence operations. The body had been preserved with industrial-grade chemicals, suggesting a professional job. Someone had kept Samir on ice for years, then dumped the body. But why now? Riley stared at the evidence board in her office. Red strings connected WebTech, Parallax Systems, Marcus Chen, the MSS, and now Elise. Then she saw it. A name she hadn't focused on in years. Dorian Voss, former legal counsel for WebTech, fired 2 months before Webb's disappearance. Known for his ties to offshore shell companies, Voss had resurfaced as CEO of a defense tech startup, Cyphertier. She picked up the phone. Harrison sat alone at a bus stop in Culver City, hoodie up, hands in his pockets. It was old behavior, habitual, places where cameras were rare, where faces blurred together. He wasn't sure if he was hiding, watching, or baiting. His mind kept circling back to Marcus's letter. The cryptic phrase, "They kept their word." Who exactly had they been? The Chinese MSS? The intermediaries? Or someone deeper, buried inside the American system? A figure approached, taking the bench beside him without looking over. "You're drawing attention again," the man said. Harrison turned slowly. It was a face he hadn't seen in 9 years. Julian Mercer, former Deputy Director of National Intelligence. What Mercer told him changed everything. Again. The leak at WebTech wasn't just foreign infiltration, Mercer said. It was domestic, too. Parallax was a front for a black-budget surveillance program run by rogue elements in our own government. Harrison stared at him. They used your technology. Then they set you up when you got too curious. And Marcus? Chen was caught in the crossfire. A useful asset with a tragic weakness. Why tell me this now? Because your evidence blew it open, but didn't kill it. They buried what was left, but now Elise is working on tech that could expose everything. If they can't control her, they'll erase her, just like Samir. Harrison's voice was cold. Then we don't let them. That night, Harrison met with Martinez, Riley, and Agent Robertson in a closed-door meeting. It wasn't official, it wasn't sanctioned, but it was necessary. "Do you trust Mercer?" Riley asked. "I don't trust anyone," Harrison replied. But he didn't deny anything I already suspected. Robertson tapped the table. "So, what do? We build a trap," Martinez said. "Let them come for Elise, but we watch every angle. Cameras, surveillance, backup. Then we roll them up." Riley looked at Harrison. "You sure about this? You've already lost everything once." He nodded. "And I survived. So this time, I'm not running." The operation was codenamed Ghostwire. For 5 days, Elise resumed her routine. Classes, lab work,
public appearances, all under heavy but hidden protection. They spotted the tail on day 2, a man posing as a delivery driver, then another posing as a city utilities worker. On the 5th night, they broke into her lab. What they didn't know was that every corner had been rigged with covert surveillance. Audio, video, facial recognition. They were in and out in 6 minutes. But it was enough. 4 agents arrested at the scene. 3 more tracked to a safe house in Van Nuys. 1 attempted to flee to Mexico, intercepted at the border. Among the arrested, a senior analyst at Cipher Tier. Fallout was swift. Cipher Tier stock collapsed overnight. Federal indictments followed. Investigative journalists traced a trail of funding to a network of defense contractors and political operatives spanning 3 administrations. Congress opened hearings. For once, the cameras weren't on Harrison. Elise testified in closed session. Harrison watched from the gallery. She was poised, brilliant, brave. For the first time, he saw Marcus in her. Not the frightened operative or the doomed father, but the man who had once told him, "We build walls to keep secrets out, but sometimes it's the truth that saves us." 2 months later, Tyler visited his father. They didn't talk about the past, or money, or betrayal. They talked about books, music, how Tyler had always wanted to be a writer but felt like no story he told would ever matter compared to the one he lived through. Harrison smiled. Stories don't have to be big to be true. They just have to be honest. Tyler nodded. Then maybe I'll write yours someday. Only if you tell the messy parts. Harrison replied. Tyler laughed. Those are the best parts. July 3rd, 2026. The city was quiet. A rare thing in Los Angeles. Harrison stood outside the shelter, handing out bottled water during a heat wave. A young man approached, early 20s, ragged clothes, uncertain eyes. You're him, aren't you? The man said softly. The billionaire. I used to be. The young man hesitated. Why'd you come back? Harrison handed him a bottle. Because I never really left. I just got lost. They sat together in silence for a while. Later that night, Harrison walked home alone. He passed the mural again, the phoenix, still vibrant under the streetlight. A small sticker had been added near the bottom. It read, "It's not about rising. It's about what you do when you land." Harrison smiled. He kept walking. Not as a billionaire, not as a ghost, not as a headline, just as a man. Alive, awake, and finally free.